Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us today from wherever you are. As we've already seen, we've got people far and wide listening into what we're doing on today's webinar. My name is Claire Wright, and I'm a member of the NAWIC Queensland Events Committee, and today I'm going to be the moderator for this webinar. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land in which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Before we begin, some initial housekeeping. I have mentioned to those that were on the line earlier that we'll be using Slido today to run some polls and Q&A. So if you have your mobile or the website open when Marlene starts, you can then scan that QR code and that will give you access to the polls and Q&A today. If you are having any trouble, please let me know through the Zoom chat, which is on the right of screen, which a few of you have already found. And that'll be open during the whole webinar, so I can respond to you through that. Marlene will also be answering some questions in the Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. If there's anything that you'd like to ask, please pop a question into that in the Slido one if you can. That'd be great. Lastly, this webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to the NAWIC website after the session. It'll be available for all of today's participants. So let's get into the main event. Today's webinar is presented by Marlene Cole. Marlene is an international award-winning resume writer and a frequent speaker at career expos across Australia. She loves stories and is a career storyteller. Her experience expands across many sectors and includes mentoring aspiring women and graduates in the engineering and mining sectors. So a good fit, I think, for the NAWIC audience today. So today, Marlene will be discussing the features of a great resume and some tools to help you create your best resume yet and promote brand you. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Marlene.
Thank you so much, Claire. So I'm very excited to be here today, and I hope you're enjoying your lunch break or morning tea for Meg. If anyone's having any issues getting into Slido, you can use your Google search and look up slido.com, and then you can just put the NAWIC Queensland hashtag in there as an attendee. So we're going to get started straight away with Slido and asking a question. Now, while you're getting it all organised, I just want to share with you my experience in construction. So I did a lot of work loading wheelbarrows, dirt, concrete, bricklaying, stone wall making, helping rip out walls and rebuilding, all of that, many years of it. And the best thing about it was at the end of the day, where I was able to go up to that wheelbarrow and I was able to turn around and hold on to it and pretend I was a horse and run along pretending I was a horse with a carriage with that wheelbarrow. I did all this before I was 15. So that's why, as a child, my dad was a real handyman around the house. We had a massive 2-story house in Melbourne, and we were always working. Every weekend, we were out in the gardens. He was renovating. It took him 30 years to renovate it. Never finished, but that's okay. And I suppose that's where I got my love for construction and a lot of imagination being a horse. So today, what I want to do is make sure that you understand that we are all brands. We're a brand because we're on social media, but career development starts with writing your best resume. And that's what we're going to talk about today, and bringing in experience, which it doesn't have to be paid experience. Like for me, if I did want to go and be a labourer on a construction site now, I may try to pull those first 15 or 10 years of work, which was probably slave labour. I definitely didn't get paid for it. I had a roof over my head. That was enough as far as Dad was concerned. But there's experiences you can bring in to your career that might not be relevant, and that's especially when your career changing. So we're going to talk about a lot of things here. Now, with the Slido, just keep in mind, if you want to ask a question, I'm a big believer of no question is a dumb question. So feel free to ask anything. And the good thing with Slido is that it's an anonymous. So no one needs to know it's you asking. So anytime through the presentation, if you've got a question, throw it in the Q&A section, and then we'll come back to it at the end. So let's get started. And I don't want to start. So if we look at where you're at the moment, I want to have an idea of where you're at. You might actually choose one or two of these. But let's see, are you happily employed, but you actually want a pay rise or you want a promotion because you're actually doing a bit more than what you expect? Do you want to return to the workforce? So you might have been out of the workforce. So as you find them, remember just to hit the bottom, there's a little green button that says send. So you might choose it and then we hit send. That's what I always have to remember. So yeah, you might actually be a graduate. You've just finished maybe civil engineering and ready to start a new career. Great, we've got 10 people, we're coming slowly. Also, you might love your job, but you're ready for a new company. So maybe change of dynamics, change of responsibilities or opportunities. You might be happily employed, but your company might also have a new contract coming in too. So let's have a look and see. We've got a few more people to join us. Okay, we've got another 10 that haven't replied, so maybe you're having a little bit of trouble. So we've got a lot of people that want a promotion and pay rise. So a little bit of happy employed, but definitely ready for a career change. That's great. Someone, Sarah's having trouble with the app. Hopefully Claire can help you. You can also log into it on your computer opposed to your phone. So if you go to slido.com and then it'll say if you're joining a presentation, you just put in the hashtag of NAWIC Queensland. So we've got 24 people. So yeah, a lot of people. I think all of us nowadays, we all want some more money. We work too hard and we know we give a great job. We give great skills and we do a really good job that maybe it's a little bit more money, or it could be you want to be promoted. So you're ready for that next step in your career. Now, the other one is ready for a career change. So is it a total pivot? So that could be something if people are looking for a total career change. I know my husband for 25 years, 30 years was an electrician, and then he decided to go into mental health. So doing that career change was a huge step for him to step into the mental health space. And I've also got mechanics that are looking at becoming nurses. So there can be major changes there. It's good to see that 36% of us are happily employed. There's no one returning to the workforce and no one that's a graduate. So it looks like everyone here's got a lot of good experience. So that's really good. And it helps me understand what you're probably trying to get out of this, because, you know, you could be happily employed, but COVID happened and it showed people that they were happily employed, but all of a sudden they had to pivot. So we've got pretty much nearly everyone there. If you're still having trouble, Claire will try and help you out. You do have the QR code on the side at each of the polls, but we'll move on now and let's get right into the start of what I'm presenting today. So most people, when they think of a resume, they think of a resume like one of these. You go to Google, you go to the Seek the Seek resume, the middle one's the Seek download. You'll maybe go to Microsoft Office and you'll look for a resume template. If you Google, say, an engineering or a lawyer resume online, you're going to pretty much see these. Nowadays, there's a few people jumping into Canva and they're using the pretty ones. So there's got a photo and there's lots of columns. So what most people know, a historical resume is something a bit like this. So I hope you're nodding and thinking, yeah, this is a bit similar to mine. So the thing is, this is what we created 30 years ago, or I created probably 30 years ago, a bit more than 30 years ago. And it was primarily a typewriter-based resume. So if we think back, and I'm sure there's a few people here that have used a typewriter. And if we think back, I was 17 when I typed out my first resume. And my first resume, it was basically my name, my address, phone number. Then it was basically education. And then if I had any experience, I would have put the dates, the job title or the company name, and then just that list of tasks. And when we say list of tasks, I call it a bit of a laundry list because it's things that you're actually paid to do in your job. And so when you typed up your resume, and mine was normally one or two resumes, but a massive pile of paper screwed up on the ground, just mistakes. But what would happen is you either went through the local paper or the big paper on the weekends and you found a job, you rang them up, and then you either posted your one resume or you actually went into a few different places and handed your resume in. So because your resume was so hard to make, because you were using the typewriter and it was so easy to make mistakes, it took a lot of time. And so a recruiter or the HR or the business owner kind of knew that one resume, what you got was what you got. But let's scroll forward 30 years later, we've got technology. And technology now means that you can be a creator, you can be a designer, you can even be an artist. And your resume has to sell you because you now are the CEO of you. If we think of brands, if you think of a brand like McDonald's, you think of the big arches, you think of Nike, the tick. People think of you, and what comes to mind is particular skill set, particular abilities. And so you now take charge of your own career online. We can create a website. We've probably got all LinkedIn profiles. Now that is your marketing tool, and your resume is another part of your marketing of you for services you want to offer an employer. Not employer, employer. So technology's changed. And with that, unfortunately, what I keep seeing is that these resumes are still around when they changed 15, 20 years ago. And so let's say with COVID, I had been working for myself for 15 years. So running a resume writing business based in the Pilbara and also then with New Generation Careers. And so 15 years of working for myself, I'd been out of the workforce for quite a while. So at the start of the last year, I thought, well, I think it's time to get a job. With COVID happening, I want a bit of job security. So I applied for a job, found it on Seek, applied online. But for me, after 15 years of writing my resume, it took me a whole day to rewrite my resume for this job and another day for my cover letter. And so if I had have used any of these templates, I would have looked the same as everyone else. So what I did was create this. Now, my resume doesn't look like this anymore. It was purely to get the job I'm working part-time in. I competed against 88 other people for one of two jobs. My resume was only part of the process of getting the job, but it really stood out. It really showed that I knew what I was talking about to help people with their careers. So let's have a look at where your career is going. And when I say that, it's about, as I said, you're a brand. You are the CEO of you. So nowadays, being that marketing tool, you always have to create strategic and unique marketing content. And this isn't just for the resume, but your resume still is very much a part. And I kind of like to say now, resumes are that old style. We want to create a yesame. So that's it. If you're always creating strategic and unique marketing content, you're going to create a yesame. And I'm going to talk about how to do that because it's like, oh, okay. So if we think back to the old way of getting a job, when we get that phone call to say you've got the job, woohoo, yay. It was normally, as I said, you'd handed your resume in, you'd probably said hello to them, had a little impromptu interview, or you had sent your resume in and they knew you were the person. So if we think back to then, your resume was to get a job. And normally you just waited for the phone to ring. And when it rang, you got offered the job. But today, your resume's job isn't to get a job anymore. Your resume's job is not to get a job. How bizarre is that? It's crazy, but your resume's job nowadays is to get them to pick up the phone. Your resume's job is to get them to get you in for an interview, because you'll see a job and you'll go, I could do this blindfolded. If they just got me in for an interview, I'd have it. But that's the problem with those old style resumes. They are to get a job when you've met someone. But what we want now is to just get them to pick up the phone and get you in for an interview. So that's it. Your resume's job is to get an interview. So if the phone isn't ringing, your resume isn't working. And I want to repeat that. If you're sending your resume out for 10, 20, 50, I had a mechanical fitter had sent his resume out for 556 jobs. He said it worked because he got 20 interviews. I only ever send my resume out once, and I normally get the interview. I might, before COVID hit, I probably sent my resume out 3 times. I had 2 interviews. So my resume was working. Now, if we think about today, even phones have changed. You have a mini computer in your hand, and at the click of a button, you can email your resume to a decision maker. You walk down the street, someone says, I've got the perfect job for you. You just get on your phone and they've got your resume. So your resume has to change. It is a marketing tool. Now, what job are you after? So jump on Slido. I'd love to see what job you're after. You might need to type maybe a job title. Maybe you have a few, but I'd really love to see what type of jobs you're looking for. So even if it's a dream job or that next step in your career. So we've got project manager. Yeah, that's great. Management. Yeah, definitely. What other jobs are there? I always say I want to be a yak herder when I get asked what job. I think it'd be cool walking the Himalayas, talking to yaks. Great. So board member. So board member, that is a really nice big step that you've got to show a lot of stuff. Yeah, contracts advisor, HR, associate designer, a lot of business developers, business managers, superintendent, great, associate. Yeah, there's some great ones in here. So just remember, as you type it in, remember to hit enter or send. An event manager or management, leadership entrepreneur, office manager, great. Sustainability, yeah, that's becoming quite a big industry as well. Senior executive. Any others? Got a few more people to jump in there. I'm going to jump on as well and see what's happening. So yeah, talent manager, they're in huge demand at the moment. Systems manager, definitely great. Senior manager. So there's some quite more senior level roles people are looking at. I want to be, I don't know what I want to be. I want to be a truck driver. I'm just going to put this in just to see, because we're still waiting on a few people. So if you type it in, just remember to hit send. Where's Marlene's truck driver? Oh, there I am. Yay. Any others? Does anyone else want to share what type of role or job they're looking for with their next career step? Remember to hit send. All good. So yeah, I think we're very much looking at those more senior roles and more management. So that's giving me a bit of an idea of what we want to talk about. Rightio. So that's, I think, the biggest step is when you decide you're looking for a new job, you might be starting to scan Seek or Indeed or government websites, job boards. And as I said, technology's changed. So most people say, upload your resume, apply for the job. So once a job is posted, normally what you see is there's lots and lots of job seekers apply. So I had up in the Pilbara a boilermaker. He was going onto a construction site. He knew it was going to be competitive. We targeted his resume for the exact work they were doing, and he got the interview. When he was called in for the interview, they said, this is a formality. you've already got the job. But he was competing against 900 other Boilermakers. So there's a lot of people that say, yep, I can do the job. His resume worked, not just to get the interview, it got the job. And it was, as I said, the formality. When we think of, say, the oil and gas industry, when a traineeship comes up for a process plant operator, you're competing against 4,000 other people, 4,000 job seekers that all want to be trained for this role. So there's a lot of competition. And if you're applying online, what tends to happen is you upload your resume, you have to log on, create a profile, and then you go through the process. Now, a lot of these are called applicant tracking systems. And what I say to a lot of people is your resume working? As in, when you send your resume out and you upload it to these websites, do you get any feedback? Or do you get an automated email saying, thanks, but no thanks, you weren't successful, or we'll hold your resume in our database and reach out to you when something else comes up? Normally what happens there is you've kind of hit that funnel, the top funnel, and you can't get through because of maybe a glitch in your resume, the formatting, or you're just not hitting the keywords. And we're going to talk about that a bit later. But what I also want to share with this is recruitment companies. I had a Randstad recruiter a few years ago come to me and say, Marlene, look, people don't understand, but when I put a job up on Seek, he actually had an example of two jobs he had, one for a manufacturing electrician and one for a commercial electrician. So if we think of electricians and the trades, most people go, electrician can do electrical, but a manufacturing electrician maybe doesn't necessarily know how to change a fan, whereas the commercial one probably doesn't know how to work on fixed plant. So there are two actually very specific different languages that these electricians would normally use. And within 2 seconds of him putting both of those jobs up, one person had applied with the exact same resume to both. So he just kept his resume very broad and said he was an electrician. So this is a catch, is when there's a lot of job seekers applying, most people have that generic template, and so they all look the same. So a recruiter isn't using your resume to bring you or give you a job. They're actually using your resume to rule you out. It's easier to say no, no, no than, maybe that I've got to read between the lines and ring them. So this is a challenge. Most people are getting stuck at that top and they never hear anything. But really, what you want to do is you want to be interviewed. So if you can bypass putting your resume online and you can go straight to the decision maker, and that's something really good for internal promotions, but you still have to have your marketing brochure to sell you, because they only know you from who you are in that company, whereas you might have a lot of experience that you want to bring in from somewhere else. So those few people will be interviewed. So, if we think of 900 people, they're only going to interview maybe 5 to 10. So it's a big screening out method, not a screening in. But ultimately, everyone that applies at that top end knows I can do the job if I've been given the chance. So only one person's got that opportunity to get the job. So this is why those old resumes aren't kind of working, is because the internet and companies' databases are full of very vague job description and job tasks that says that you can do the job, but how do you do it better? So how do you do it better, and how do you create that strategic and unique marketing content? To create that resume, there's 5 steps, 5 elements. I don't like telling people this is how you should lay your resume out, because it's subjective. And if I create an award-winning resume, you'll give it to a recruiter and they'll go, I just want to change it. A resume is never a stagnant object anymore. You've got to change it. You've got to update it. You've got to adapt it for each role. So we've got to have impact. Now, when I say impact, there's a strategy to how your resume is going to be read. So what is relevant to the reader? So your resume is your history, but it's actually for the reader. So impact is kind of the layout, the formatting, and also the strategy behind it. Now, the next one is your hook. Now, hook sounds a bit weird, but your hook, if we think of the old resumes, most people will put objective, career summary, or what you want. Now, the hook What I say is that bold bit where you put career summary, the hook is the job you're after. So you actually name the job. So as I said, that recruiter within 2 seconds of putting their job up, you within 5 seconds can change to manufacturing engineer, manufacturing electrician, or commercial electrician. So you actually title your resume. Because for me, I've run 2 recruitment agencies and I've read so many resumes, probably 10,000 or more. I can't read a resume anymore. Even when I create a resume, I've actually got to print it off and start from the bottom and read backwards to see where the mistakes are, because I can't just scan. Some people say it's a 10-second scan, a 30-second scan. For me, it's such a quick scan, I really struggle to read a resume. So you need to hook me in straight away. And that hook, if I see the job title that I'm looking for on the top of that resume, I'm going to keep reading and I'm going to scan a little bit slower. And that's the same with the keywords. So especially if your career changing, if you are, let's say, a surveyor and you want to go into project management, your keywords aren't going to be just surveyor keywords. You've got to go, and I always say, go to Seek, because I use Seek as a research tool. You can use Indeed, but I find just Seek's process is really easy. And so what you do is you don't worry about what state, but you pull up every single project manager role. Now, project manager, again, is a bit vague. You've got to be direct civil construction project manager. So have a quick scan through. If you see a job that's of interest, you right click, open it in another tab. I'm really bad for having 20 or 30 tabs open. But what you do is at least get 5 Seek job ads or 5 job ads open. When you start looking through each one, you'll start to see the keywords. And the keywords might be project management, but it might be that they have a specific project tool they're using, or it might be about bridges, or it might be greenfields or brownfields or something different. So you'll start to see the language, and each of those job ads, and I must admit, sometimes job ads aren't written very well, but if you can find out what the project is, you can start using the words that are relevant. So if you're a surveyor going into project management, and I'm just using this as an example, and the job you want is on bridges, but you've never had bridge experience, what's the relevant experience that you can bring forward? So it could be project managing 30 plant operators. So then they're picturing that you're actually at ground level clearing that civil section. I'm just throwing stuff out there, but you will start to see a pattern if you use the keywords. Now, if we jump up to the top left, benefits. The benefits, it's like, why you? Because if we think of the old resume, they're all stagnant. They're just saying, I can do the job. Whereas the YesMA, your benefits sit at the very top of your resume, but they come together purely from what your strengths are, but also what the job needs. So if you kind of look at both, you'll say, right, this is what they're after, this is what I offer, and you bring it together. It can't be fluffy words like motivated, dynamic, results-driven, enthusiastic, professional, because they're blah, blah. They're fluffy words that recruiters don't read. The benefits will tie into their job description or even the position description. So really look there. Stories. I know we haven't got much time today, but I'm big on career stories. And as Claire said, I'm a career storyteller. I love listening to people's stories as well as sharing my own. So I've got to keep moving because I do talk too much. So how do we create this? This is what you're competing against. This was a resume. It's a Tory Award, so the Toast of the Resume Industry Awards. I won this back in 2012. So 2012, I wrote it. I won in 2014. Now, if we think about 2014, it's nearly a decade away. When I wrote it, it was pretty much a decade. But we see all 5 elements in there. So the first one, we see the impact. Now, the impact, most people go, this is a very colourful resume. This is the only resume I've ever put photos in. But the hook is she's a senior interior designer. So it makes sense. We want to hook them and show them how good she is. Now, with this one, we were using a recruitment agency, and the recruitment agency's branding was orange. So the strategy, which is that impact, was to give it to them that it looked like their own work, and then they could hand it to the client as a portfolio for this candidate. So we've got the impact, we've got a strategy there, and we've got, I want to read. The hook is she's a senior interior designer, but then we've also put in, she knew that this client was dealing with commercial, hospitality and retail, and a bit of residential. So then the benefits is that paragraph at the top. And she even used a quote, the only important thing about design is how it relates to people. And that's what she believes. So she exceeds client expectations. Now, it's no good saying these things. You've got to back them up. And that's those stories in the middle. So she was headhunted to expand a business. She secured 20 lucrative contracts within 6 months. So we're seeing she can quantify it. And when you're at those senior levels, you're dealing with KPIs, you're dealing with numbers, you're dealing with money. Name the project value, let's have a visual. The keywords, we actually went into a few job ads, but we knew which job we were targeting. So we brought as many of the keywords that were relevant. And we also backed them up with the strategy, with that impact in the next section. So again, we've got impact, we've got keywords, we've got benefits, we've got stories, and we've got the hook. She got the job. And all the photos went out of her resume. This is her brother. I actually won 3 international resume writing awards. 2 of them were siblings. So he was actually in Adelaide and returning to Sydney. So he didn't want to go overboard with, look at how great I am, I'm amazing, because he said he was mainly putting his resume back in front of companies that had been his clients in the past. Now, he had been working for himself for a good 5 or 6 years out on his own. But the strategy, so the impact for this one was we wanted them to create a brand for him, so building presence and solution focused. The layout, we kind of, because he didn't want to big note himself, we actually in the middle, in that little grey bit just past halfway, we pulled some of his LinkedIn recommendations into this resume. So the second page, between each job, we had a quote from someone else saying how great he was. And that was a rare and exceptional, talented technology leader. He's the thinking man software architect with an eye for design. So you can use quotes of leaders in your field to say how good you are. So that was the strategy and the impact behind there. We've got the hook, information technology specialist. He wasn't quite sure which role, but he had sub hooks underneath. So he wanted client and personal management, business infrastructure, web and application solutions. Now, when I actually look at this resume, this was back in 2014. So I entered it in 2016. That benefit section there, the 3 bullet points and the quick blurb, all of that's too fluffy now. In the last 5, 6 years, you've got to quantify things more. And even the keywords. So if we look at the keywords, they're quite vague now. If I opened up some Seek job ads for his industry, they'd be speaking a different keyword language. And then the stories, we actually only used 3 or 4 bullet points for each of his jobs because they knew what he did, but how did he do it better? So we really wanted to kind of give them an idea, like when a recruiter's reading your resume, they don't know if a managing director is for 1 or 2 of you or a team of 40. So we kind of put here that he was installing things across 12 countries. So you've got to give them an idea to take that next step. So with these, this is a new language. I'm not saying it's such a pretty document because I did pretty them up a little bit, but here's is very much what it was. And so was the one before. But if you go into the link here, as Claire shared, you can actually start reading the resumes and actually take your time to read different resumes in here. They're from all over the world. If you're playing in the big field of finance or senior management, you'll actually see people are using graphs. They're actually using pie charts to show how they've made the workplace better. So the more you read, the more you'll see how much they've changed. So if we think about it now, is your resume selling you? So let's have a little break and jump on the poll and let me know, is your resume selling you? So do you feel it's a list of just what you're paid to do? Does it look a little bit like everyone's else? Or have you actually quantified and created really strong bullet points that actually give an impression of the projects you're working on, through to how many people are in your team, how you stepped into a role and made it your own. Maybe that it's a resume that you do adapt and it looks very different. Like for me, I start totally from scratch. I'll only bring my stories across, and all the front end is actually based on the job ad. Because to me, as soon as you see the job ad, all your answers are there and your resume has to marry up with it. So that's good to know that people are sometimes the best thing to know is that my resume isn't working or it's not selling me, because you are great at your job. If you asked 5 or 10 people around you at work, what am I really good at? You'd probably get some feedback. And if you looked at your resume and went, is that showing how good I am? So yeah, it's good to know, where do you feel your resume is at this stage. What I was going to do at the very start when I showed those templates was I was going to show you this resume, and I was going to say, if it's not selling you, rip it up. Just rip it up. You got to start from scratch. The worst thing you can do is actually sit there and go, how can I make this resume better? Now, we're looking at something that worked 30 years ago, 20 years ago. It might have gotten you your last job. But today, competition is really heavy. And I mean, I was lucky. I stepped into the marine industry with no experience at all. And when I went for the job interview, I actually shared a lot of stories. And I could see, even though I had no experience in their industry, all this experience I had previously had was transferable. And it was dealing with the employee relations. It was a memorandum of agreement where 2 companies had merged and there was a lot of not happy workers. And so I said to them, this is all the things that I can do. When I left that interview, and we'd actually already discussed what the wage was, I said, no, I'm not happy with that. You'd need to double it. They did. And that was because I was able to sell myself. What I had given them in the resume sold it enough that they could take it to senior management to double my wage. And the way it was doubled, I mean, it sounds really like, what? You went into a job and they doubled your wage? Well, both companies went, we'll pay the wage we offered and combine them, so she got double. And I did. And it was my dream job. Anyway, so we've got 24 people have answered. Maybe some people are a bit shy to say that their resume might or might not be selling, but most people think it's kind of okay. So that's good. We can definitely work on it. And the way we work on it is, what I would say is, most resumes just have a long list of facts. You cook, clean, if we think of project management, manage project, direct staff, maybe you might employ staff, work with contractors. So their facts tell, but stories sell. And the way stories sell is, those stories you want to share at interview nowadays have to be on your resume. So all of that's in your head. And this is why you have to rip that resume up, because if you have it in your head and you stare at the computer and you think, how am I going to put this in words to sell myself? You're not going to. You're going to struggle, and it's going to be so frustrating. So you've ripped your resume up, sit it to the side. You want to use stories. So you've got to write those stories down and put them on paper, or type them on a Word document, but you've got to write them down. And I've had clients do this for many years, and a big burly bloke will say to me, Marlene, you gave me the warm and fuzzies. I wrote down my 3 stories, and you know what it would do. And it's like, I didn't expect you to say warm and fuzzies. But he actually had some aha moments, and he actually had the clarity to see what he was really good at. So when we say story sell, think of those super skills. Think of those skills that if you're sitting alongside someone else doing the same job or a similar job to you, and you look at them and you think, how come they're struggling with that? I find it really, really easy. That's because it's your strength. It's your super skill. It's nearly like your genius zone. It's something that you find easy that other people really struggle with. If you think of being in the office, you're the one that everyone always calls to help with the IT. but your job isn't in IT, but you've got a troubleshooting brain. So, you know, there's lots of super skills you can use. Helper. So I always think of these stories of when I first stepped into the job, it was sold as a great job, but there was a lot of stuff that the CEO was struggling with. So I got in and I did this and this and this, which helped. So it could also be help as in doing something a little bit extra or actually solving a problem. I had someone constructing a gas plant over in Gladstone, and the electrical engineer, or it was the mechanical engineer, they could see there was going to be major problems with the HOAs. And so they had to challenge senior management and Texas or Houston and say, this pipework is not going to go together. So he was at that senior level, but he had to push to get them rewritten because he knew it was going to cost mega millions, if that's even a word, once they actually put it all together and realized it didn't fit together. So he helped turn it around. Wins and results. So if we're winning, even if you're just a part of the little team that won a big contract. So your company, you might have won more contracts. Your contracts might have grown by 15 or 20% since you were there in a particular span. Might have been a bit of a fluke, but you kept the wheels turning. So you were part of that. And there's results as well. Now, I always say if you're not winning, you're learning. So what were some of the learnings? What were some of the things you had to overcome? What were some of the challenges you had? I always like to start a lot of my sessions with what was going wrong. Tell me a day from hell, because sometimes it's easier to write everything you don't want or those challenges that you had than trying to work out what you're really good at. So it's just unpack and write as much as you can. The more waffle, the better. And then there's a source story. Source story is actually like your elevator pitch. It's that story you're going to walk in to an interview and they say, tell me about yourself. And you go, oh no. So what's that source story? Where'd you come from? How did you get here? What are you bringing to the table? So all of them combined are really good. Once you get them on paper and the more you write, I've had a client write 17 pages. We only did a 3-page resume, but he had extra stories. And this is the thing, the more stories you write down, the more you'll see a pattern. So what are your super skills? So again, if you think about working alongside other people, what are some of those skills that you're really, really good at? Can you think of anything? Just jot down a few. Remember to hit send. But what are some of your super skills? Marketing, yeah. Communication. So I will say skills are great. And this is a bit of a trick question because when you write down skills like organizer, planner, detail, when we look at job ads, we want people that are motivated. We want people that can communicate. You know, they'll always say in a selection criteria, verbal and written communication, building relationships. All of these are what you see on the job ads, right? And they're also what you see in most people's resumes. But I'm sorry to say, it's a little bit fluffy. We've got to unpack it. One of the biggest chats I had was going to marketing students at UniSA and saying, you're all marketers. What makes you different? And when you start unpacking those stories, I'm an SEO guru. I can set up a marketing campaign from scratch. I'm really good at writing briefs. You know, every single one of us can communicate. So that's why these stories are important. Don't just say, and this is great because we're seeing these skills, but that communication skills, write down a real challenging conversation or communication situation you were in. Good at spotting the gaps and filling them in. So that starts to then tie into your benefits of why you're great. And so now we tell the stories. So these you wouldn't use in your keywords, but you'd make sure they're throughout each job, because building relationships by 28% through blah, blah, blah. Task focused, that could be a real deadline. So yeah, definitely we've got some really good stuff. Organizational, I love that one, because as soon as you have that skill written down, then start unpacking it. How How did I organise? When I walked in, there was no filing system. I ripped it all apart and I started again. And then I trained every single department, how many departments. So we've got to start really breaking it down. So this is great, finding solutions, detail. Yeah, there's some great ones here. So these are really good starting points to then unpack your stories, because we can't just say, this is my skill. We want to unpack the story. So that's great. Really good start there. And what happens is, if you know your dream job is to just organize, you might be, that does it bring me joy type person. But if you can then demonstrate all of these things that you came along and you organized and what difference it made to them, because this is it. At the end of the day, when someone's reading your resume or when they want to hear your stories, it's how's it going to help them make more money, save time, do things safer, get more contracts. At the end of the day, they're a business. So how are you going to help them? What are the results? And the good thing is, when you have all these stories, they aren't just for your application tools. They're for when you meet people, when you go to a networking event. LinkedIn, you'll start to see a pattern. Oh my goodness, I love attention to detail. I'm going to once a week put a story about attention to detail, and people will see that I have attention to detail. I don't have to scream it from the hills. I can demonstrate it and I can give other people tips. But it also helps with your job hunting, which to me ties in with networking. And the other thing is, it's for nurturing your career. So many people were safe in their jobs until COVID hit. So you never know what could happen. You don't know what could happen with your own health, that you might have to totally change careers. And the thing is, our students, our kids, when they leave school today, they're going to have 17 different jobs in 5 industries. Now, I've had 27 jobs in 13 industries. If I think back to my first ever job, 13 different industries. So all my stories can transfer across. There's strengths there. There's that leadership when I was coaching basketball, through to running a recruitment agency, through to running retail. All your stories can be used throughout your career, so you nurture your career. So I just want to quickly go through these because I really do want to have some chats. But if we look at Katie's resume here, she starts with her education, and that's one of the biggest things I do see. Her education, she wanted to change careers. She was talking about swimming. She put it in text boxes, which aren't really good, and she basically sold that it was the employer period position, whereas those roles weren't what she was after. So she was putting who she was employed by and her position at the end. But then she actually did the good old job task list: order parts, invoice and accounts payable, troubleshooting. Now, what she was actually going for was retail, for admin. She wanted to get into admin. So what we did first was we unpacked her stories. What jobs did you love? What jobs do you hate? She didn't want to do pool management anymore. So we unpacked the stories first. Write down all the stories we understood. Her target was, as I said, the admin. She loved. So what we did was we said, well, what were your dream jobs? And her dream job was actually working for Hanson Yuncken and the Electrical Solutions. But she was sending that old resume out and not getting any phone calls for admin roles because she was selling herself as swimming and pools. So the impact was the strategy. Even though Hanson Yuncken was way back in her resume, we wanted to bring it to the forefront. So this was that strategy to make the impact, and then to relate it to the keywords. So she loved doing warranty reviews and claims. She loved purchase orders, equipment servicing. So then the benefits, even though we've got the blur at the top, we also doubled it up with these 4 really strong bullet points of what she loved doing, then backed it up. With that strategy and the impact, we actually tied all her pool stuff in together, but we didn't talk about pool works. We actually talked about the admin side of it, because as a recruiter, I would have just assumed she was just doing retail. So we really brought a whole lot of information in. So this is how unique your resume has to be. And that's definitely for a career change back to what she wanted. So if she had kept talking about pools, no, they're just ruling her out for admin. So her whole front end was the admin. Maybe next time, if she's already on a site, we might take the career snapshot away and put qualifications. So she might be putting all the speed of typing. She might put the program she's used to and everything. So let's see what you can add to your resume. This one, you've got to pull up what you think first you really want to add to your resume. What's the most important thing to add to your resume? What do you think you might want to add in next, and follow through to probably the thing that is the least important, or wherever it's at. But this is probably the last poll. So let's see what we've got that you think you can add. So you just pull it up, select them from the list below, put them in order. Yeah, definitely stories. Yeah, that's great. Oh, we're jumping around. Strategy. So yeah, I always believe unpack your stories first, because how do you know where you're going if you don't know what you love or what you're good at? So if you look back and review your career and all those amazing things you've done, you'll start to have aha moments. And to me, when you unpack a whole story, and it could have been a situation on a site where even something horrible happened with a safety incident, and the processes you went through and how the company changed and how it might not have happened again, or there were systems put in place. When you unpack that one story, you might actually have 4 or 5 bullet points that are relevant to the career you're going for. And it might not all be stories. It might be the administration side of it. It might be the ICAM report or the incident investigation, or it might be the communication of dealing with safe work, or all of those. So yeah, we've got 19 people. Any more there? So yeah, definitely stories. And yeah, strategy, because to me, the strategy is really important. But the job title will always change, but it's always good to be clear on where you want to be. So where are you heading? So once you get your stories out, then the whole strategy turns to what are they looking for? What is that company looking for? So yeah, strategies, benefits. Benefits is the first thing at the top of your resume, but it's the last thing I write, because it's got to be adapted to each job you go for, but still bringing your strengths in. Keywords, definitely. Keywords, when you pull them all in, you then have to not just say them in the top section, you've got to back them up. So you're going to use those keywords throughout your resume. This is great. I'm glad everyone wants stories now. So how do you turn your resume to a YesMA and not just get an interview, but get the job? 4 easy steps. So the first one, get those stories out, write them down. It's probably the hardest thing you're going to do. And that's why I've got that lady going, ooh. You just got to start writing them. Then you got to know what job, because those stories don't mean anything unless they're relevant to the job. Then I say job search. Now, job search isn't looking for a job. Job search is actually research. So when you know what company or what job, I'm big on reading annual reports to really understand, and especially even like councils, what commercial or civil construction is coming up in a council. I want to read their annual report, because they're going to build a whole lot of bridges, or they're going to invest in more sports stadiums. Then I'm going to talk about that. So you're kind of gathering intel on that company to talk about relevant projects you've been on. And then the resume. But is it a resume or is it a YesMA? So, oh my goodness, I can't believe I want to get into questions too. So I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I've got my little QR code for New Generation Careers. There's freebies. So if you go into the new store.newgenerationcareers.com, the career storytelling, there's 2 documents you can download. One is to unpack those 3 stories of when you're in that zone, when you're doing what you love doing. The more detail, the better. And the second one is what I tend to give out at Career Expo. So it's got the example of the IT resume, the before and after. It's also got one career story, but then it's also, let's dive a little bit deeper, and it's got the 5 elements in there as well. So they're free for you to just download, and also you can access my 3 international award-winning resumes. So what a winning resume looks like. Now, if you do get stuck, I'm always here to help. So just to kind of get you thinking about stories, people have so many stories. Even ask your partner, ask your workmate, what am I good at? Tell me a time where I really excelled. And that might even help you get started. But I love LinkedIn, and you should too. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. I'm always happy to join people on LinkedIn. And also LinkedIn's really good. Look in your local area for LinkedIn Local. So that's a networking event where no jobs, no business cards, it's connecting with people, and you never know who's connected to who. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into the questions.
Cool. I might come back on and ask you some questions then. Thanks, Marlene. It's good fun. Yeah, we've had a few questions come in while you've been talking today. So the first one we've got is a question about the length of the resume. So how many pages do you think a resume should be?
Between 1 and 4. And the reason I say that is normally, like, I'm working with a lot of teenagers, so they might only have 1 page. But for most of people in what we've seen with this cohort is in that senior management role, you're probably looking at 3 pages. 3 pages at the most. Academics, I tend to go for 4, but you're only going back 10 years unless it's relevant. And that's where you might use that strategy of doing a career snapshot. But, you know, I've created engineer resumes that are 2 pages. That IT one was 2 pages, and he had 20 years of experience. It's the hardest thing's cutting the waffle, like repeating the same job over and over again. So it's just maybe showing a few examples. Think of your resume as that, you know, you want to buy the latest Mercedes. It's like, it's a quick, sharp, oh, I like the look of that. Oh, I've got to ring them and organize a drive. So it's got to have enough, because your resume is going through 3 audiences, and that's what I didn't talk about. The first audience is normally an applicant tracking system. So you're just sending it out to a deep black hole and waiting, and most people don't hear anything. The second's the recruiters. Now, they've just been given a job description and they're just trying to match the resume. But the third one is the decision maker. So you've got to have the language for all 3, which is really challenging. But if you use the 5 elements, you can normally get it all in. And yeah, 3 pages is my average.
Excellent. And you then preempted the next question, which is how far back should I go with your resume? So you were saying, what, 10 years is as far back as we should go?
Yeah, 10 years. But I mean, this is why it's subjective. I've had a client that was a project manager. He'd been in the role for a good 5-10 years. And before that, supervisors on civil construction sites. When he went to the interview, they wanted to know, why isn't your apprenticeship on the resume? And it was back in the 70s. So you've still got old school recruiters, you've still got old school business owners that want to see everything. But you could maybe use your LinkedIn to show everything. But to me, your resume is selling what you're relevant for. And I think that also brings me to, and I might be jumping again, is sometimes you have to let go of those courses and training. If they were 15, 20 years ago, that secretarial course 30 years ago, that was on a typewriter, not relevant anymore. Let some of the stuff go that isn't relevant.
Well, it maybe does link into the next question, but probably from a different angle. It's more about, should you put your achievements on your resume? And I'm suspecting you're going to mention something about stories in your response here.
Yeah, yes. So that's what your achievements are. Your achievements are your wins. Think about it this way. If you got a resume that just said, I can do the job, would you be interested? You want to see someone that's had achievements, that's been successful in their role. So when you read a resume, you want to actually say, this person can't just do the job, they can excel at the job. So those achievements have to be there. You don't have to write achievements. And this is the thing, when you start reading the Tory Awards, if you start looking at a few of those examples that are up on that website, there's hundreds, you'll start to see every single bullet point is an achievement. It's showing quantifiable measures. And that's, you can't have anything but achievements on your resume.
Excellent. Well, that might also, again, everything keeps linking in. It's probably because we're talking about the same topic. Yeah, so the next bit I think links best is, should you add your link to your LinkedIn profile or LinkedIn page into your resume?
Yes and no. What I would say is most people are doing LinkedIn bad. They're on LinkedIn, but they're not active on LinkedIn. So you've got to think it's a marketing tool as well. And that's the thing. A recruiter is probably going to go to your LinkedIn. So your LinkedIn and your resume are 2 separate documents that are the strategy of your next career step, right? So your resume isn't an image copy of your LinkedIn isn't an image copy of your resume. I put my LinkedIn on my resume because I'm really proud of it, and they can see more stuff. So when they read your resume, they go to your LinkedIn to see something different. And LinkedIn, we can always do a LinkedIn talk, how to leverage LinkedIn for your career, because if you're not using LinkedIn, if you're not commenting on people's posts, if you're not following the companies you want to work for, if you're not creating content and having conversations on LinkedIn, it's probably just a stagnant page, just of a job list. So, yeah.
Yep. All good. So the next question we've got is, how do you make your resume stand out when there's a required form in what you've got to complete?
So I'm guessing this is probably government.
From my experience, that's definitely government. So
you just wasted your lunchtime. I'm sorry. You shouldn't have been in these conversations. You just do what you do. No, joking. I normally do say that is, the government process is very dry, but you can still use those achievements. So what I do when we work with people for a government role, we always go into the government, so the job, and they'll normally say, how do you want your resume written? It's still old school. I've had people go straight through to interview, straight through to jobs by creating these new ones. But the strategy is the selection criteria you have to meet. You might have to do 2-page selection criteria, but tighten up those stories and put the selection criteria bullet points, achievement based, in your resume. So you might kind of still use their job description and pull out maybe 2 or 3 responsibilities. You can probably put achievements, but back up, like tighten up the worded selection criteria with really positive bullet points that quantify as an achievement. But yeah, you do have to a little bit, but I think their resumes are really ugly, so I just ignore them. But I do follow the process. If it says 2 pages, do 2 pages. If it says 4 and 2 pages for the criteria, you got to play the game.
Yeah, and I think there is still, in most applications I've seen, you can still upload your resume to that process as well. It just, like you said, might not stand out as much because you've got to go through that form process. So, another one here we've got is the cover letter addressing the selection criteria more of a sales pitch than a resume?
I get this question a lot. To me, they're still very separate. So many people go, oh, I've got all the good stuff in my cover letter. You've got to bring everything you want to say at an interview into your resume. I think the cover letters are really good to sell why this job. So I always say, work on the resume first. Resumes, when I write a resume for someone, it still takes 7 to 10 days. It's just really manipulating all those stories to match what the job's after. So I create it there, but there'll be leftover stories that are really, this is where it's always good if there is a job ad, you ring them, because this is all we want them to do, is to talk to us about the job. So you actually ring them and say, what are the 2 top things you really want for this person? They might go, oh, someone that's done bridges. So you'll go, I've used bridges in my resume, but I've got a really good story. And so I say there's 3 parts to your cover letter. The first part, and sorry if you've got delicate ears, the first part's to suck up the company. Suck up to them. You guys are awesome. You've just won this great contract and, you're the best in the business. And I mean, it might say it on their website, we're best practice, we're brilliant. So, or you actually look up some news of some exciting stuff. So say, for example, here in Adelaide, we've got the big naval shipbuilding yards. So if I was writing a letter to Australian Submarine Corp, I'd go, oh, isn't it amazing that ASC has won an international award and the French are coming? I want to be a part of it because I just live around the corner. So you'd say something that sucks up them to a certain degree, and then you'd say this job is a perfect match. Then 2 bullet points or a little blurb of, I have been doing this for 30 odd years, or I'm ready to take the next step. Why? I'm already doing this, but I'm not being paid for it. So you kind of, those stories of that bridges, working on this particular project for Queensland Roads, I was the lead supervisor managing 12 bridges. Now, there was some real technical elements of it. We had a lot of weather conditions. So that's kind of, you elaborate a little bit on those 2 bullet points after you've gotten some intel from them of what they really want. And then the third paragraph is, why you? On a personal note, I've just relocated, or I've just finished this study and I'm ready to take this next step. So you can be quite personal as well. But that's it. So your cover letter isn't the be all and end all, because they may not read it. They may read it, but I always work on the resume first, and the cover letter comes with the leftover stories, but still just as strong a document. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So we've got three questions, and we are slightly over time, so I appreciate you staying on, and everybody who's still online listening. So the next question is, some people put a photo in their resume. Is this a good option?
No. Unless you go...
Trigger warning. Please note the following response includes discussion of assault. Viewer discretion is advised. Please skip to 1 hour, 7 minutes and 21 seconds to bypass this discussion. Thank you.
No. Unless you're going for a modelling job. Honestly, I've put a photo on a resume once, and that was for someone going for a real estate job. And you think about real estate agents, they actually have a photo on their card, they have photos on their cars, they have photos on the walls. So, and actually I did speak to a teacher here in Adelaide, a young girl using those Canva ones with all the photos. Your resume is going to it's unconscious bias. People look at your photo and they make a decision. Unfortunately, they can just go to your LinkedIn profile and they'll see your photo. But your way you look, your age, your marital status has no place on a resume, because it has no relation to how you can do that job. So don't put your photo on it. I had a photo on a resume when I was working in an Aboriginal community. The woman actually had a glass of wine. It was a dry community. Ruled her out. But yes, so going back, this teacher, this young girl had a photo on her resume, uploaded to Seek. Recruiters and business owners can get into the back end of Seek. This probably isn't the place to say it, but I am trying to share it because they asked me to share it with people. A gentleman reached out, said, I'm flying in from Sydney. Can you meet at the cafe at the bottom of the hotel? Your resume is great. She went there. She actually was a 19-year-old, done a bit of modelling, so she looked bloody good. She's gone to the interview. He's like, yep, no worries. Normal interview, really good conversation. She left. He rang her up 2 days later. You've got the job, just need you to come and fill in paperwork. When she got there, come up to my room, raped her. He was then, lucky she had all the evidence. He was arrested in front of his wife and kids, because we don't know if it's more than once he's been doing this. So, I mean, it can happen anytime, anywhere, but to me, why put a photo on a resume? I mean, they could have looked at her LinkedIn and got her that way, but it's a horrible situation, and I just don't know why. You know, I've seen male mechanics with a photo on their resume. No. Is that enough?
Yep.
No.
Yep. Short answer is no. Okay, so the next question is, how do we promote our volunteer involvement with NAWIC as a selling point on our resume?
There's a few different ways, and to me, it'd come down to the strategy. Where are we taking it? How is it useful for this? Maybe it's a second section. You could put it in community involvement, but also really break it down. Treat your volunteering as a job. Think about it when you first stepped in there, what you need to fix. So for me, I worked with women. I was on the committee of Women in Mining, Women in Resources. So if you look on my LinkedIn profile, I actually helped update the whole mentoring training manual. So I brought in a whole lot of that. We actually brought in new, fresh, webinars and things like that, which increased percentages. So use those volunteer stories, and don't use the word volunteer, because people know you're giving back to your community. So you can use that as a marketing strategy to sell where you want to go, which could be community engagement in increasing women in construction.
Great. Good advice. Last question then is, so you need the keywords from your job advertisement to get through the ATS, but it doesn't look like you've cheated and just scattered words throughout your documentation and resumes to get there.
Yeah, yes and no. Some people try to beat the ATS system, and they copy it and they put it in white font, in like a 2 or 3 font right at the bottom of the resume. Don't do that, because what happens is when it goes into the applicant tracking system, everything becomes black and they see you cheated. The thing is, everyone's time poor. They're asking for this experience. you are putting that experience in there. If you have a look at the Tory Awards, you'll start to see the key words. Because to me, the biggest one I see is finance. People say, you know, I'm an accountant, but they don't ever talk about spreadsheets, P&Ls. They don't talk about mergers and takeovers, and, you know, they don't use the words of their industry. So it's not cheating. You're saying, I know my industry. This is what I'm looking for.
Excellent. Okay, so that wraps up all the Q&A that we've had today. So thanks everybody for all your time. Thank you, Marlene, for your insightful presentation, and I hope that everyone on the line today has got some new tips and tricks as to how they can improve their resume. Like Marlene mentioned before, if you want to find out more, you can click on through to the New Generation Careers website, and that link is in the chat at the moment, so it's going to disappear quickly, but you need to get in now if you want to click on that. Or you can follow Marlene on LinkedIn. So thank you all for spending your time with us today. As I mentioned earlier, this will be uploaded to the NAWIC website, and if you're interested in more NAWIC events, check out the events page on nawic.com.au or follow NAWIC on LinkedIn and Facebook. Thanks again, everyone, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.